I'll just share from my personal experience, and you can take it for what it is and sift through it yourself. I would say the order of operations that really should be your guideline or your roadmap to marriage when you're dating is as follow. Spiritual, mental, emotional, physical. Those are the four in that order. If you're going to do it the opposite way, you're going to get the opposite result. And trust me, because I've done both, and one has led to a really amazing, fulfilling life that is in obedience to Christ, and the other, the opposite, a really unfulfilling, destructive life that could have gotten even worse. So when you are a man dating a woman and you are wanting marriage to be the destination of that dating, it's not easy. It's something that you've got to take seriously. You don't date just to date. As far as, Christian men dating, it's really not even like a fun thing. Purely, it's not just all fun. There's a lot of commitment. Obviously, there's sacrifice. There's sorting through your emotions. There's communication. There's boundaries, and you're setting up her for success and you for success, and you both are kind of in tandem pursuing marriage. And it's tough because it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. Even just to get to marriage, even if you're only dating for a few years, there's still so many moments that need to chain together, and the two of you have to be on the same page. That's a massive thing. So with that in mind, I'll go back over those four. You want to make sure, first and foremost, that you and this woman line up 100% spiritually. I challenge young men with this question: is she a Christian or does she love Jesus? And I say it that way because there's many Christians that can just claim the name Christian because it's easy to check that box. It's easy to label yourself, I'm a Christian, and that's all that she has to offer. I would be very cautious. If you have question marks floating in your brain about her faith, I would not proceed further. You want just undeniable evidence in her life that she is in love with the Lord, and she has been saved, that she has grown and been discipled, and she's pursuing her relationship daily with Jesus. Because if you end up married, there's going to be opportunity where the two of you are going to have problems. You're going to have things you have to overcome. And if you are with a woman who is praying for you and pursuing the Lord, if she's not getting through to you, she can just hand you over to God in that sense and say, Lord, you handle him and work in his life. And vice versa. You can trust God with her heart if she is in love with the Lord and allowing him to work in her heart and her mind. So first and foremost, don't play yourself. Do not deceive yourself. Don't say things like, oh, she'll come around, she'll get better in her faith, or she'll want to go to church. If you're in that zone, and if you're in that zone, I know because I knew. And so don't compromise on that one, because it's the foundation. If you compromise on that, the house is going to tumble down. So number one is spiritual. Make sure that you're dialed in spiritually. If you have question marks in your brain, you're probably not. If there's an undeniability of wow, this is who this woman is, her faith is genuine, it's pretty clear. And so if you're kind of I'm not really, some days I'm kind of maybe, squash it and just move on and just wish her the best. Because you don't want to get tied up in these other three categories, because then it's going to be really hard to step away. So that's first. Second is, I would say, mental. Make sure you're mentally compatible. And that kind of sounds like a weird phrase, but a lot of this has to do with communication. A lot of this has to do with what you talk about, what you enjoy talking about, how deep you want to talk, how shallow you want to talk. Make sure you're compatible there, because when you're 70, 80, 90 years old, you still have decades of a relationship to maintain and enjoy. And a lot of that's going to boil down to your mental compatibility and your fortitude mentally. I also say fortitude because you want a woman who's a soldier. This life is tough. You want a woman who has endurance, who has been through things, who understands what it means to be let down or disappointed or not get what she wants, because there's going to be times in life where the two of you in your relationship go through that, and you're not going to get things to pan out exactly how you want. You don't want a woman who's mentally keeping score and keeping tabs and trying to build her own little contentment kingdom. You don't want that. You don't want, it's like the Eagles said, they have a great line in the song Desperado. Don't you play the Queen of Diamonds, boy, she'll beat you if she's able. You know, the Queen of Hearts is always your best bet. That's such a great mantra for young men. Don't bet on the Queen of Diamonds, because she's betting on diamonds being her fulfillment. She wants you to provide her with a certain standard, a certain lifestyle, and she's keeping score. And it's also like that punk song, girls don't like boys, girls like cars and money. If you're with a woman like that, good luck. I don't care how rich you are, how ambitious you are. There's always going to be a guy with a nicer suit and a bigger bank account. So you don't want a woman who's judging you solely on those things, and because you're going to fail at some point and you're going to be left behind. So mentally is huge. And mentally too, it's safe. It's a lot safer than the emotional and the physical. So keep that in mind. Figuring out spiritual compatibility, you can do that without being caught up physically, emotionally, and mentally. Mentally, you can figure it out and you can still exchange ideas and thoughts. You can still be friends and developing some spiritual and mental compatibility. I would recommend it. I would say build those two, just friends. And that way, if things don't go further, you walk away with some great, friendship memories, and maybe you split ways and that's it. And it was what it was, but you're grateful for it. So 50% of the battle, you could still duke out in the friend zone. I'm living proof. So the third one is emotional. This is where things get, I don't want to say, I'll say like cautious. When you start emotionally attaching with one another, especially for women, you need to be very mindful of that. Men, it's very easy for us to talk and talk and talk and say sweet things. We know how to manipulate that and use that, and that can be dangerous and that can be harmful. So that's not the move. You need to be very reverent when it comes to emotional connection, because it runs deep. And it also is for your safety too. It's your wisdom as well. Because if you are emotionally invested deeply into someone, you're not going to be seeing things as clearly all the time. And you're not going to be able to make these big decisions if you're completely infatuated and completely fogged out by emotion. Now, I'm not saying when you're dating, you got to be platonic, and that's not what I'm saying. What I'm getting at is guard your heart, guard those emotional connections, because there is a level of emotional intimacy that should just be husband and wife, and that would be the top of the pyramid. So you don't want to jump the gun and tap into that early, because then if you don't make it to marriage, you're gonna have to untie those knots, and it's gonna be painful. Fourthly is physical. One of the best things that my wife said to me early on, even like the first day we met, she said a great quote of, your commitment should never, your commitment should always be higher than your intimacy. So many people flip that. They allow their commitment to be super low and their intimacy to be sky high. It's backwards. It's wrong. It's not wise. People ask the question all the time, why should I wait to marriage to have sex? It's smarter to think about the benefits of it rather than doing the hellfire and brimstone. You shouldn't have sex because it's bad or it's wrong. Sex is a good thing. It's a God thing. It's something that he's given us. It shouldn't be demonized, but it definitely should be treated with the reverence that it deserves, because it's powerful. You're becoming one physically with someone, and you are in the most intimate, most vulnerable thing you could be doing. And so that needs to be treated with that reverence. So my recommendation there, my wisdom there, is that quote that my wife shared, is set up physical boundaries and accountability and communication, and be open and honest with each other in your dating process. I'm not saying like you've got to go like old school and like rock a purity ring, or I'm not saying that. What I am saying though is be an adult about it and understand your limits, understand where you can date, where you can't date, what's appropriate, what's not. For instance, when my wife and I would travel, we would get separate lodging. Yeah, does it cost more to get another hotel? Yes. Is it a little more complicated if I have to stay at my place and she stays in my mom's place? Yes, but is it worth it? Is it worth investing in your relationship? If you're already nickel and diming the dating, and you're probably not going to really be fully committed to invest when it comes time to put a ring on it, to have like, don't be so caught up on the financials and the sacrifice. Relationships take sacrifice, period, end of story. But guess what? All great things take sacrifice. Ask any high-level athlete, anyone in the Olympics, all of them invested every ounce that they possibly could for the greater good, the greater cause of being excellent and great at what they are pursuing. Relationships are no different. People that speak poorly about marriage are probably people that have failed at marriages and have refused to change or to improve relational maturity, and they want to defend their insecurities. So I would really encourage you guys, keep this in mind, keep it at the forefront of your mind. If you reverse this order, it's very dangerous. If you're a guy and you rush into the physical side of things in a relationship, dude, all of your red lights are going to turn into green lights, and all of your green lights will be red. Like, it's going to be backwards. You're going to be seeing things completely inverted. And you've heard a lot of like unfortunate but kind of comical stories of like Helen of Troy, the face that launched 1,000 ships. It's a true thing. If you're thinking with the wrong head, you're moving into dangerous waters. And so if you jump in physically early on, you've already jumped past all three of those that you should have already invested in. And so emotionally as well, if you jump the gun there, and so now physically and emotionally you're all tied up, now you've got to try it and hope that you can sort through the mental and the spiritual. And if those are afterthoughts, you're not going to sustain any relationship on the physical. You guys could have the most amazing love life ever, but it's not going to sustain it. It's simply not. There's not enough hours in the day, and so you're going to need much more than intimacy to sustain a marriage or a relationship. So I would just keep that in mind, keep that at the forefront. It's super helpful if you can just put these things in the right order and work through them together. And guys, be bold. Women want honesty. They want to know who you are, what they're dealing with, what they've got to handle. Don't play games with them. If you want to play games, stay single and go to the club. Like, honestly, I'm not going to play that with you. If you're not in a place where you want to date to marry, then don't lie to yourself, And I'm not like telling you rush out and go to the club. That's not a good idea either. But you get my drift, is don't say one thing but want another. So just be honest with where you're at and what you want. My wife and I had gotten to a point where we'd been through enough BS. We'd been through enough pain and hurt with people who didn't want what we wanted. And then we met on that common ground, and we worked through the sacrifices and choices that had to be made to get to where we are now in our marriage. So that's a huge thing. It's just that order of operations. I know I just hit you with the rapid fire, but I'd rather give it to you just straight up, no chaser, so you can understand that there is a proper order for this. And I've lived it. I've been on both sides, and I would never bet on a guy who's going physical, emotional, mental, spiritual. I'm not betting on that relationship to last. And I would bet on the relationship that's built on Jesus first, mental compatibility and maturity, communication, trust, and then emotional understanding, love language and how to show love to one another. And then the physical. Physical really honestly is like the cherry on top in that way. And so it's going to naturally happen once those other three are in place. And it's going to be a lot richer and more fulfilling because those other three are there. Lastly, if you're dating and you are just so confused and just don't know, you've got to seek counsel. Like I sought some counsel early on. I was going to a Bible study with married couples at my church. They were praying for me. They were involved. Again, this goes back to the T of STAG, where we need to walk together. I'm not saying have 10 chefs in the kitchen, but I am saying don't try to do this all by yourself and pretend like you know how to date super wisely and all that. You don't need to gossip or share or air too much out, but you can definitely ask questions of like, hey, what's the next step, do you think? Should I ask for her hand in marriage at this point, or maybe this? Another good quick recommendation, one thing my wife and I did, it's a good idea, I think, when you are, before you pop the question, I would have what we called it our skeletons in the closet conversation, where we took a day and just kind of had some raw honesty about our life, about the things that we struggle with, the things that we've been through. People might call it baggage, but I really think there is a moment in time where you two are comfortable enough and you want to get to the next step. But it is a good idea to kind of air that out, and you don't need to get too explicit, graphic, nothing like that, but enough to kind of give the person like an honest look at who you are and what you've been through, and what you're working on, so they know what they're getting. Don't be the used car salesman trying to sell a lemon, and not popping the hood and being like, hey, these are things that I've been through. For my wife, like, she knew that I'd been through a divorce. She also knew that mental health has always been a management issue for me, and something that I've gotten better and better at throughout the years, but it's always something I got to keep a pulse on. So yeah, those are just a couple examples. And then I would say last but not least, there is a book called The Sacred Search. At some point, maybe I'll put it in the description, maybe get sponsored, and maybe I'll get a kickback or something. But until then, read that book with the girl that you are dating. That would be a thing that I would feel like is very helpful. People can get all caught up on like, I got to read 100 books to figure out how to date. I don't think you got to go that far. I do think it is helpful maybe to have one source where both of you are kind of sourcing wisdom from some mature author, and it gives you a lot of great questions, a lot of great things to consider. Because if you've never been married, there's things you don't necessarily think about. Like, you don't think about that you're going to have to be a great roommate. You're going to have to daily work with one another when you live together. You're going to have to decide, do we want to buy a house that we remodel, or do we want a newer house? Do I want to be doing demolition day? Or do I just want a house that's like really nice and just already taken care of? Do I want to trade real estate or kind of stay in the same house for a long time? Do I want 2 kids or 6 kids? Like, these are all questions that they kind of dive into, just to kind of check those boxes and make sure that you're both at least on the same page enough to move forward and continue on. So those are my 4 things for the godly section of STAGnation, and hope it's helpful. Email me, KyleLowryPromotions@gmail.com. Would love to talk even further and get some of your insights as well. Until then, this is Kyle Lowry. stagnation.